Have you ever just stopped and wondered how a country with over a billion different opinions doesn't just fly apart? Well, today we're cracking open the ultimate rulebook that holds it all together, the Constitution. We're going to explore what it is, why it's so important, and how it actually works, using the incredible blueprint of the world's largest democracy, India.
So let's just start with this massive question. How on earth do you get 1.4 billion people, we're talking different religions, languages, backgrounds, rich, poor, to all agree on a single set of rules for how to live together? I mean, it sounds completely impossible, right?
Well, the short answer is they don't. They don't agree on everything. And you know what? That's totally fine. They don't have to. What they do agree on is the process for making the rules. They agree to play by the same game book, and that book is the Constitution. It's really the one thing holding the entire game together.
So before we dive into India's specific playbook, let's back up for a second and ask a more basic question. Why does any society even need a rulebook like this in the first place? What's its real job?
Okay, so you can think of a constitution as kind of like the source code for a country's entire political system. It's not just another law that the government makes. It's the supreme law that actually creates the government. It sets up the big institutions, like a parliament or a president, and crucially, it defines the limits of their power.
And this rulebook is so critical for two main reasons. First, it creates coordination. It basically sets the rules of the road so we all know what to expect from each other. And second, it provides assurance. It's a guarantee that if you follow the rules, everybody else has to follow them too. And if they don't, there are consequences. That's the trust that allows millions of very different people to live together. To really get a handle on what a constitution does, it actually helps to think of it as having 5 main jobs to do for a society. All right, let's walk through these. First, like we said, it creates coordination with a set of basic rules. Second, it allocates power. It answers that huge question. Okay, who actually gets to make the decisions? In India, that's mainly the parliament. Third, it limits the government, protecting our fundamental rights, things like freedom of speech. Fourth, it actually lays out a society's aspirations. It sets goals for a better, more just future. And finally, it helps build a collective identity, defining the shared values that make a nation, well, a nation.
And that fourth job, the aspirational one, is just perfectly captured by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, one of the key architects of India's constitution. He reminded everyone that a constitution isn't just some dry legal text. No, it's a moral commitment. It's a promise to build a society based on these deeper values: liberty, equality, and fraternity.
Okay, that's enough theory for now. Let's get to the good stuff and see how India's constitution actually puts all these principles into practice. We're going to start with the blueprint for its democracy. And the first big question, how does it choose its decision makers?
The very first rule in any political game book has to be about how you choose the players, right? The Constitution has to lay out the method of election. This is job number 2, allocating power in action. So how does India do it?
Broadly speaking, democracies use one of 2 main systems. There's proportional representation, where if a party gets, say, 30% of the vote nationwide, it gets about 30% of the seats in parliament. Simple enough. But India chose something different, a system called first past the post. The whole country is split into 543 districts, or constituencies. And in each one, it's a straightforward winner-take-all race. The candidate who gets the most votes wins, even if it's not a 51% majority. Now, this system can lead to some really dramatic results. Just take the 1984 election. The Congress Party got less than half of the total votes cast across the entire country, only 48%. But the number of seats they won was a totally different story. Just look at this. This is first past the post in action. With only 48% of the vote, Congress took home over 80% of the seats in parliament. That is a massive landslide. Meanwhile, another party that got over 7% of the national vote ended up with just 2 seats. So why does this happen? Well, it's because in this system, millions of votes cast for the losing candidates in each of those 543 races essentially count for nothing in the final tally. Now, the framers of the Constitution knew this. They made a deliberate trade-off. They were willing to sacrifice perfect representation for a system that usually produces stable, majority governments.
So the election decides who gets into parliament. But who's actually in charge of running the government day to day? That brings us to the next big piece of the constitutional puzzle, the executive branch.
And again, you've basically got 2 major models in the world. In a presidential system, like the one in the US, the president is both the head of state and the head of government. They're the boss, period. But India chose a parliamentary system, which splits these 2 roles apart.
Here's how it works in India. The president is the formal head of state, representing the nation as a whole, kind of like a monarch. But the real executive power, the day-to-day decision-making, rests with the head of government, and that's the prime minister, who leads the cabinet and has to have the support of the majority in parliament.
Jawaharlal Nehru summed up this role absolutely perfectly. He said the Constitution wants to create a president who's a great figurehead, but one that neither reigns nor governs. So the position has immense authority and dignity, but not direct power. They are a symbol for the entire nation, but it's the prime minister and their team who actually run the show.
So, when you put it all together, you have this incredible document, a blueprint that coordinates an entire society, allocates power, and expresses a nation's highest ideals. It's not some static, dusty old book sitting on a shelf. It's a living promise. But, a promise written on paper is one thing.
And a rulebook is only as good as the referee. The blueprint for a fair, functional democracy exists, but the document itself is just words, which leaves us with maybe the most important question of all. Who's the umpire? Who makes sure the game is always played fairly? And that is a story for another time.